I will go ahead. You can go ahead and start the streaming and the recording, and I will call us to order when you let me know we're good to go.
And we are now recording, so we are good to go.
Perfect. Excellent. So I'll call to order our committee meeting for the Audit and Finance Committee at 3 o'clock on May 6th. We have an agenda in front of us, so I'd like to start by welcoming everybody to the meeting. I think this is our third one now, so we're hitting our stride and we're making our way. So we do have an agenda in front of us. I'll just look to our administrative group to see if there are any changes to that agenda.
No, none from our end.
Okay, thank you. I did see that there was the land acknowledgement noted there. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the land acknowledgement yet, and it wasn't included in the deck. So hopefully we'll get that fixed up for next time so that we have that, so that we can make sure that's consistent throughout all of our meetings. And then obviously we are streaming live, and the recordings will be held, I believe, on our YouTube page that's accessible also from the EMTSC website. So with that, I will look to see if there are any questions on the agenda from the committee members. Seeing none, I will look for a motion as presented on the screen. Ray?
I'll move that the May 6th, 2021 agenda be adopted as presented.
Perfect. Thank you. Any opposition to that? Seeing none, we will call that carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from the April 8th regular committee meeting. Those have been circulated in advance for everybody's review. Thank you very much to administration for going over those minutes and making sure we had them. Are there any errors or omissions noted from the April 8th meeting minutes? Glenn, I saw your hand go up.
None noted, so I move approval of the minutes from the April 8th regular committee meeting minutes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that, I will look to see, is there any opposition? Seeing none, we will call that carried. Thank you very much for making that motion, Glenn. So administration, I will turn it over to you to present item number 4, the update on the finance function stand-up for insurance, banking, and policies.
Sure, thank you. So just a few points consistent with the board meeting that we held a couple of weeks ago. We have proceeded with getting quotations on insurance coverage, both for director and officer and for general commercial liability. Right now, we're focusing on the general commercial liability to support tenant considerations. And then the commission will need to, the incoming CEO and the board will need to really monitor, I suppose, the activities of the commission as it brings in staff and starts performing other activities outside of its stand-up to determine, the appropriate level of coverage that it's receiving and how it continues to adjust its policies, recognizing that the commission wants to manage costs today. We're not over-insuring, right? Given that the commission is not delivering operations, it doesn't have transit services that it's providing, and right now it's pretty much limited to standing up its back office functionality. So as those continue to evolve, then the commission will need to continue to monitor its insurance. Otherwise, we're getting the core requirements established here now. So the banking, per the previous board meeting, the commission did approve a bank. So that bank is the TD, Toronto Dominion, and we have been in contact with them. Applications have gone in to finish off from where we left off with them up until board approval, as well as communications with the City of Edmonton and the City of St. Albert regarding their relevant guarantees and letters of credit to support the initial stages of the commission financing that will come into place. So everything is moving along as would be expected on those horizons, and we have notified those who participated in the process of providing quotes for the banking setup in terms of their being unsuccessful. So that moves forward with the support of Edmonton and St. Albert and the Toronto Dominion. Finally, in terms of policies, and you will see some policies coming up today, we're continuing to work through the financial policies for the commission, which are really the primary focus of this committee. What we are bringing forward today, though, is really only one around financial reporting, and the other 3 are more broader based policies. So we're focusing our policy development on the things that are most critical for the commission at the early stages and continue to assess those policies and work through that process. I think what's worth noting is the board has been fairly active in terms of bylaw development and some of the policy development that's coming forward in the absence of a CEO. But as the CEO comes on board, and you'll see that in one of the policies we're going to refer to when we go through the next section, is the board will be focused more on board level policies going forward, and then the CEO will deal with operational type policies and the related procedures to support those policies. So really that continues to evolve more in a real time as we identify matters that the commission needs to deal with, risks it needs to manage, the activities and operations similar to the insurance discussion. They look to, pardon me, look to have the supporting policies at board and administrative level and procedures to support, mitigate those risks and support the operations. So those are really the three main areas that are being focused on from the finance function at this point in time. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have on that front, but that's the primary area of focus today.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for those brief updates. And I'd just like to welcome Mr. Bill Shores and Councillor Chantal McKenzie for joining us. Thanks, Bill. We got your note letting us know you'd be a few minutes behind. And Chantal, glad we were able to get you the right link and get you connected in here. So haven't really got too much into the meat of it. We've just on item number 4, just had a quick update from Alan in regards to the finance function stand up. So go to questions, and I see Mayor Ray Ralph, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, in just regards to the banking, so will all our banking be set up when the CEO comes online?
It probably likely will not be set up the day he is here. If the question is around things related to compensation and those elements, then certainly it'll be ready by the time that we have to manage dealing with wage disbursements and those items. We're anticipating it'll likely be done the first week that he is here. Sometime towards maybe the latter part of next week, towards the end of the first week that he's here. So we're not seeing any risks in terms of that front. And there's nothing that he needs to, we're waiting on him to action in terms of setting that up. It's just a matter of time and getting the appropriate pieces in place. Yeah, but we don't see any risks in terms of having the banking established to address, I guess, 3 matters. 1, making sure payroll is ready. Number 2, and payroll and related benefits. Number 2 is vendors who have provided support along the way, and the third would be member municipalities that have provided some of the interim funding. So yeah, everything is tracking as to plan.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Al? Oh, seeing and hearing none. Thank you very much, Al, for the information. And I will look for a motion. Who would like to move that? Chantal? Perfect. So we will have Chantal move that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'll make the motion that the Audit and Finance Committee accept the materials and discussion as presented during the update on the EMTSC finance function stand up as information.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I will look for any opposition to that. Excellent. Seeing none, we will call that carried. Moving on to item number 5, the endorsement of critical policies. And we do have a couple of decision items on this. So Al, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, so you're stuck with me again. Bill Shores is here to support any questions we have as we work through some of these policies. These are board level policies. So when I referred to, and we'll go through the policy development one first because it kind of sets the stage. So we have 4 to go through here. We have policy development, fraud and whistleblower, the financial reporting, and procurement and expenditure. And so what we've done is you've been provided with the policies, the recommended policies. The way this works is the Finance and Audit Committee looks to review those policies, provide any feedback, and essentially either endorse them as they are to go to the board for approval, or endorse them looking to see any of the updates that have been discussed, with those updates being circulated amongst the group and not having to come back to the committee for formal approval. So the first we have is around the policy development side. And really what we look at with this one is to really understand how policies get developed, what the approval process is, and the process then for also adjusting them and repealing them, amending them, etc. So that's the purpose of this. Key points is it really defines the difference, as it says on the screen, between bylaws, board policies, and administrative policies and procedures. And it outlines the roles and responsibilities of the board and the CEO and the functional areas in terms of developing those policies and then monitoring those policies. And really why it's needed is to just make sure that everybody understands who's involved in what policies, who's got accountability for the approval or the amendment of those policies and the changes, and provides that clear line of sight into the accountability. And of course, some policies are split up between strategic and operational and administrative policies. It's possible to have a policy that is approved at the board level, and then you've got administrative procedures that are underneath that policy that are approved by the CEO to really enact the policy and make sure the policy operates as intended. So that's the purpose of this one. I can take kind of your lead, Councillor Laurie, if you'd like me to walk through the actual policies themselves in any greater detail, or are we comfortable that people have had an opportunity? I know there was an early version of the policies, and then we had some changes to them as we were fortunate to get Bill's legal review on them. And so if you'd like me to walk through anything, then I'm certainly happy to walk through the specifics that are included in your package. We can play it policy by policy.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll start with the one that you've just gone over, the policy development policy, and we will look to see if there are any questions that have come up from any of the committee members, or if any of the committee members would like to walk through it in a little bit more detail. I know you've given us a pretty good high-level review, and as mentioned, we've seen these, we've had them in our package, we've had the opportunity to look them over. So definitely, if there's anything anybody wants gone over based on what they've read, or if there's any questions or concerns they have, I'm more than happy to take those now. Oh, I'm seeing some heads shake in that, so I think we're okay with that level of review, Al. So if you want to continue on with that.
Yeah, and we just have one motion at the end to cover all four of them here.
Okay,
so the second one that we have is around the fraud and whistleblower, and I think everybody would be generally familiar with the intent of having fraud and whistleblower policies, but really to encourage and enable employees or third-party stakeholders and volunteers to raise concerns, right? So that the EMTSC can address and correct inappropriate conduct and actions. They tend to split right between financial considerations, operational, or treatment of employees or customers or other areas. So really this outlines the commitment that employees will make in exercising due diligence to identify instances of fraud, disciplinary actions that result if employees fail to comply with processes, includes the reporting of responsibilities of employees and senior management, right? Assurances against retaliation, consequences of false and vexatious discourses, and a nice way of saying, if people are treated improperly because of conflicts in the workplace, that they're addressed properly and there's fair and equitable treatment. So I think why it's required is fairly well understood by everybody who's in the public sector. But really the commission wants to make sure that it's committed to that accountability and transparency, sound ethical operating practices, etc. So the reason we have that here, fairly comprehensive, again, taking a look at a number of different streams of types of behaviors. And then it'll be upon, the duty will be on the CEO to enact the procedures and activate those to make sure that this policy can actually be acted upon and provide the right channels and the right avenues for people to raise concerns and the right approaches to manage investigations and the right reporting back up to the board. And I think at this point in time, we're looking to make sure that, that this policy looks to be on the CEO's first 90 or 100-day list to make sure that some of those steps and processes are in place early in the process for people to use the mechanism. So I'll pause there and see if we've got any questions.
Excellent, thank you. So I will look to see if anybody has any questions on that.
I have none.
Okay. So seeing none on there, I just have one, and it actually relates to all four of the policies, and maybe I just get you to speak to it at this point in time. I see that at the end of each policy, there is a policy review section stating that because we are onboarding a new CEO and want to give him the opportunity to review the policies, that we are reviewing them within 180 days of the appointment. Now, with that review, will the CEO be required to bring these policies back to the board for another approval within the 6 months? Or does this simply give him the opportunity to bring it back to the board if he sees something that needs changed?
That's a good question. And Bill, I might defer to you to, what we might set as an expectation around that.
So I think the expectation is that the CEO will review, and if he wants changes, we'll bring it back to the board. If he's satisfied that the policies meet the needs, it just goes to the 4-year cycle. And even on the 4-year cycle, he assesses whether the policies need change and then makes recommendations for change. So if nothing is done, it rolls forward. If somebody wants to change something, it might not. And I would anticipate, and I agree with Al, that this is something that the CEO should have on his deck right off the bat, because these are policies that he didn't guide, and he ultimately will need to be guided by these policies, so should have an involvement in their creation. So if he's not satisfied, he should be bringing something back to you within 180 days.
Definitely. No, that sounds good. And I think that's perfect. That, like I said, we as the board have moved these forward, and it gives the CEO the opportunity to, in his initial review, if he sees anything that he feels directionally or culture wise that he wants to adjust, then he can do so right out of the gate without having to wait for the next cycle. So, and then if he doesn't see anything, then it's good. It just gets swept off his plate, and we don't have to take up important time in meetings re-reviewing the policies that we just set within the last 6 months.
Yeah, and one of the reasons you may say, well, why bring them forward now when we're a couple of weeks from a CEO? But we view these ones as being important enough that we don't want, the board really wants to make sure these are in place, because it could take a little bit of time for the CEO to get around to coming back to these, which is why the 180-day mark. So it's just good practice to make sure they're in place even in advance. So.
Oh, sounds good. So if there's no other questions or comments in regards to the fraud and whistleblower protection, we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, I guess. So we had, financial management. Sorry. Financial management. So really from the financial management one, the approaches in terms of developing forecasts, budgets, other key financial reporting, make sure that we're aligned to what is required under the Municipal Government Act for annual budget preparation and their reporting requirements from a financial information return. We've spoken before about the need to start looking at securing an auditor, and we've got audited financial statements that'll be required in other financial reporting. So this lays out how that process takes place. Ultimately, the board's responsible for the oversight of the finances, and this committee here is responsible for taking a look at the results as they come and then making recommendations up to the board level for the approval of information. And so just good practice to make sure we're covering these off and making sure they are in place under the MGA and that we're not missing any of our accountabilities or responsibilities, especially as we'll start to get into reporting cycles with financial institutions and with the bank, and then having to report on actual results to budget, and within not too distant a future have to start getting into planning cycles for 2022 for strategic plans and financial plans. Excellent. So I can again turn it over if there's any particular questions that people have.
For sure. So do we have any questions or comments in regards to the financial management and reporting policy? Perfect. And again, for those tuning in or watching, the board, the committee has seen these policies before. This is not the first go through them. So we're not just blazing a trail. We definitely have provided feedback on these. And this is just the final time, hopefully, that they're brought back to us so that they can be brought up to the full board level. So we'll go on.
They are posted, and also, Councillor Laurie, they're posted on right now, they're posted on the website as part of the agenda package too.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah. So they're there for all to review. So with that, then we will move on to the last one that you've got on the list, the procurement and expenditure policy.
Yeah, so procurement and expenditure, I mean, obviously a public sector body, it follows that it needs to follow some of the trade agreements that are in place that municipalities and other levels of government follow. And we want to make sure that there's good leading practice around transparency in terms of procurement processes, while recognizing at the same time that sometimes organizations have to be nimble and make decisions in real time. So this really just provides board administrations and guidance into how procurement and expenditures work. It clarifies that the commission does have responsibilities under both the MGA and the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, which many follow, in terms of expenditures and practicing that open and non-discriminatory procurement process. Includes factors for the commission to consider when evaluating and selecting vendors as well, and outlines if you've got to do emergency purchases or unforeseen situations, how that manages and presents itself, both from a procurement process, but also approval of expenditures. You recognize that the board approves a budget, and typically then the CEO and administration work within that budget in terms of expending funds. And if something comes out of that process that is outside of the budget, approved budget considerations and operational considerations, and how does that move through to the board for approval, and who can do that? So really, this just provides that transparent, sound and accommodating procurement and expense process that everybody understands, both from within the organization and publicly. So I think it's equally as important for people to know what expectations they can have in conducting business with the EMTSC as well. So I'll pause there and see if we got any questions on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Al. And Glenn, I saw your hand go up. Go ahead.
Just a comment more than a question, that the policies here to be endorsed are very similar to what municipalities operate under anyway. And as referenced, it's we're following the guidelines or the requirements under the MGA as well. So
Definitely. Thank you, Glenn. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, perfect. Thank you very much, Al. We will then move into the motion, and as Al had mentioned, we just have one motion for accepting all 4 of the policies, so we don't need to go through 4 individual motions. Thank you very much for that one, administration. Obviously, if we felt there was an issue with any one of the policies, we certainly could pull those out and do them as separate motions, but I believe just giving the tone that we've seen, that everybody's pretty comfortable with them, so we can move ahead with one motion. So with that, the motion is on the screen, and I will look for a mover.
I'll move it if you wish.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mayor Ralph.
That the Audit and Finance Committee endorse and recommend the presented critical policies to the EMTSC board for approval.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that motion. And I'll just open up before we go to the vote, just by expressing my thanks again from the committee, and I'm sure from the board, for all the hard work that has gone into getting all of these policies developed as we continue on the steps forward of standing up the commission and bringing in our inaugural CEO and, pardon the pun, but getting the wheels rolling on the EMTSC. So thank you very much for all of your hard work on this. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Seeing none, I will call that to question and look if there are any oppositions. Seeing none, we'll call that carried. Thank you all very much. And so with that, then I believe the next motion is for us to move in camera. Al, is there anything that you need to let us know beforehand?
No.
Perfect. So I will look for somebody to make the motion on the screen regarding moving in camera. Glenn, see your hand up there. Go ahead.
thank you. I move the Audit and Finance Committee move in camera in accordance with the provisions of Division 2, Exceptions to Disclosure of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, or FOIP, RSA 2000, F25, as per section 16 through 28.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Glenn. And with that, I will look to see, is there anybody opposed to the motion? Perfect. Seeing none, we will then move in camera. Haley, do you want to just remind the committee members as to the process for that?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to pause our recording, and then please just look out for a pop-up on your screen that says to join the breakout. So just hang tight for a minute while I get us all in the room.
Excellent. Thank you. Looks like we have everybody back. Haley, do you want to let me know when we're good to go?
We are back and good to go.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we had a motion from Mayor Ray Ralph to move out of camera, which was accepted. So thank you very much. And with that, then we just have a motion to accept as information all the in-camera items that were discussed. If I can have a mover for that, please. Glenn, thank you very much.
You bet.
Do we have any other? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to make the motion, actually. I was just going to move the Audit and Finance Committee accept the material and discussion as presented in camera as information.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Any questions, comments, or discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll ask if there's any opposition. I have none, so that is carried. Thank you very much, Glenn. And before we move to adjournment, I'll just ask Al if there's anything else from the administrative standpoint that needs to be brought up before the close of the meeting.
Nothing from our end. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for all of your hard work and the great work of the administration to bring forward all the information we've seen today. We really appreciate the opportunity to have our eyes on that and have the discussions that we have around it. With that, I will call us adjourned at, I believe we're 4:12. Thank you everybody very much for your participation, and we will see you at the next one.
Okay, have a good afternoon.